while Teams is there. Okay, there it's starting now. Right, just a quick recap on elasticity and what elasticity actually means. So we're saying we're looking at how responsive consumers are to a change in price. And if that is any indication by what happened this week, we are exceptionally responsive to a change in our petrol price because we all rushed, understandingly so, we've all rushed to the filling stations and we all filled up our cars. Those of you that have diesel, I sincerely apologize that is one hectic increase in the price of diesel, but also in understanding that it's not just the price of diesel, it's gas prices as well, paraffin prices, all of those prices are now going up, right? So elasticity is literally how responsive are consumers to a change in price. And then we said it depends. It depends on the product. So in terms of petrol, the entire country basically ran to a fuel station, so we're very responsive. But if that translates to, for example, say an increase in the price of Coca-Cola or Fanta or something like that, you're not going to be as responsive. We're not going to run to the stores just because Coke is now, what, 1 Rand or 2 Rand more expensive. But now petrol is 3 Rand more expensive, and we ran to fill up our tanks. Okay, so that's basically what elasticity is. And I ran through the concept of how responsive are we. So again, what will happen in terms of quantity demanded when the price increases. Okay. And then that kind of tells you what type of elasticity that product has. So whether you have an inelastic demand, meaning you cannot do without that product, right? So your preference to change is very low, i.e. petrol. My car only runs on petrol. I cannot change and magically give my car back and then ask them for well, I can't even ask them for a diesel car because diesel's more expensive. Okay, but my car can only run on petrol. So if there's a price increase in the price of petrol, am I going to change my behavior? That's what we want to find out. The reality is I'm driving a lot faster. And traffic this morning was a lot calmer, which I assume is because now people are very conscious of their driving now because petrol is more expensive. Okay. And then we also ran through like, you get luxury. And again, luxury's got nothing to do with the expensiveness of the product or the price of the product or the quality of the product. We are basically saying any good that is not a necessity, our bread, our milk, our petrol, our electricity, those kind of things are necessities. Anything outside of that where you have a lot of variety becomes a luxury. Okay, so that's what we're talking about. The availability of substitutes, I spoke to that. Now, your income also, how much of your money or how much of your monthly income are you spending on this product, i.e. petrol? How much of your income are you spending per month on petrol? Okay, or necessities, right? Habit forming products, again, if you're addicted to your cup of coffee every month or your cup of coffee, not every month, but every day, that's a habit forming product. So are you going to change your behavior if the price of coffee increases? And for some people, because it's a habit to them, they're usually addicted, even cigarettes, that kind of thing. Are you going to change your behavior? In most cases, they say, no, you won't, because it's a habit to you. Okay. How long a product lasts, so the durability and the time period of that product also plays a role. Then we said, yeah, you must be able to calculate it, right? And then tell us what that number means. Okay, so the elasticity formula, and we'll break it down a little bit more. Price change in the dependent variable divided by the price or the percentage change in the independent variable. Okay, and the dependent variable is always quantity demanded. Okay, if you are looking at the price elasticity of demand. If you're looking at the price elasticity of supply, it will be quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in price. Price is always the independent variable, okay? Because it's how responsive are we? What will consumers' quantity demanded be, or quantity supplied if it's price elasticity of supply, be in relation to the price. Okay. I'm just running through things. And this is again what I say to you. If we are very responsive, our petrol price, we have an inelastic demand. If I have a lot of substitutes, so i.e. the difference between you increasing the price of Coca-Cola, I will then look at, okay, what's the price of Fanta? What's the price of Monster, Red Bull, whatever? I'll just look at an alternative. Then it becomes an elastic demand. You're not going to be as responsive, okay? Meaning you're not going to, you won't change your behavior very easily if it's an inelastic demand versus if it's elastic demand. Okay. Inelastic, I basically can't change my behavior. My car runs on petrol, it is what it is. But if you have an elastic demand, even a small change in that price will lead to a very big change in quantity demanded for that product. Okay. Okay, so yeah, I then explained to you and I said, look, in terms of the exam, they can give it to you in two ways. They can either give it to you as in rand values to say it was 6 rand, it moves to 8 rand, and then you have to calculate first the percentage change because that's what the formula dictates. Or in the exam itself, they can give you the percentage change, in which case you don't need to then calculate it. You just need to calculate the price elasticity. Okay, so it all depends. And if your answer is then less than 1, so between 0 and 1, you have an inelastic demand. You are not responsive to change. Okay. If it's greater than 1, you have an elastic demand. You are very susceptible to a price change. Okay. We spoke about this. So we were here, if I remember correctly, we were somewhere in the total revenue category. Okay. So we now said you have two elements here. You have an inelastic demand and you have elastic demand. Okay. Now, logically speaking, from a business's perspective, you would want your product to have an inelastic demand. Okay. Meaning, if you change your price, consumers are not going to change their behavior. But in most cases and in business settings, a lot of products fall into the elastic demand. So they need to be very strategic and very careful with how they change their price because consumers will very easily change their behavior. So when we have alternatives to your product, we are then going to change our behavior. If we don't have alternatives to your product, we are less likely to change our behavior. Okay, but from a business's perspective, okay, what does that mean in terms of total revenue? Okay, and we first then have to understand, and this comes from the principles of accounting, to say, how do you calculate revenue? So revenue will always be price minus price times quantity will give you total revenue. Okay, so then we said, great. So now you know what your total revenue is or should be, what you would want it to be. Okay, now if you then increase your price or decrease your price, that will obviously impact your total revenue at the end of the day. Okay, so we're saying, and that's here, from 0 right up until, let's say, a midpoint equals to 1. Equals to 1 is basically where you would want to be as a business. Meaning for every 1 rand change, percentage change in the price, there will be a 1 rand change in consumer behavior, your quantity demanded. You are 1 to 1, meaning you're balanced at the end of the day. You're in equilibrium to a certain degree. Okay. If you are between 0 and 1, you have an inelastic demand, right? Because we said that's here. So thinking of it logically, from a business's perspective, the lower the price, the higher the quantity demanded. So you'd want your product to kind of not putting you out too much, but the lower your price, the more people would purchase it. But as you increase your price, you'll see your total revenue then also starts to increase. Okay, so that's what you want. You want your revenue to increase, but also in understanding that once your product becomes overpriced, you're then looking at alternatives. So people will start looking at alternative products. And then your elasticity is greater than one, and that's not what you want. So you have to kind of find that sweet spot between you want your total revenue to be high, but not once your price hits a certain point, you're then making a loss because people are going to stop demanding your product. Okay, so it's finding that sweet spot between maximizing your revenue and then people not changing their behavior. So they are happy with your product, they're happy at the price. Great, you are maximizing your revenue. But once you get to a point of, okay, I'm going to increase the price, I'm going to increase the price, people are going to start looking at alternatives, and then you start losing money. Okay. And this is just a graph illustration. Okay. We discussed this, we discussed this, this is also part of it. So here we're looking at a product again. And this is the cappuccino, hence I said coffee. Remember habit forming products? Cappuccino, coffee, big one, right? So we're saying, looking at zero, obviously at zero, your quantity demanded is 20,000, meaning 20,000 people would want it at a price of zero, not realistic, obviously. Okay, what will your total sales be? Zero, because price times quantity. So zero times 20,000 gives you zero. So your elasticity is zero if you actually calculate it. Because remember now it's the percentage change in the price of the products. So you then first, because I've given you actual values, you see here, it goes 0, 4, 8, 12. So these are actual rand values, the price of the product. So it will be new. So you're first going to calculate what is the percentage change. So you'll first say it's new minus old divided by old times 100. Okay, in this case, because it's zero, we know what it's going to be. So if we look at the difference between, let's say, 4 Rand and 8 Rand, so now it moved from, it's now 8 Rand. So it will be new price is 8 Rand minus 4 Rand being the old price divided by the old price times 100. And that will give us percentage change in the price. You then would have to do the same thing for the percentage change in your quantity demanded. Get what that percentage change is, and then it's your elasticity formula becomes new. Listen to me, new. The percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in your price, and you'll end up with an elasticity number of, in this case, it was 0.1, 0.3, and so forth, so forth, so forth. Okay. Like I said, getting to 1 is a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay, so they're saying here, if you're looking at the elasticity, according to the price, it's less than 1. So that's kind of habit forming. Like people are happy with the price and it's habit forming. So your elasticity is less than 1. But once your price hits 20 Rand and it goes higher, people are now starting to be like, hey, maybe I can cut coffee out. Maybe I can change to tea. Maybe there's a different place that sells a cappuccino that's a little bit more cheaper than what they're charging me. Okay, at some point people do, even if it's habit forming, at some point you're going to change your behavior. Okay, and that's where businesses are sitting. They have to figure out exactly almost that sweet spot where consumers are happy. But if you go a little bit higher, people are going to start changing their behavior, and that's not what you want. And then your elasticity becomes greater than 1, which means people are very responsive to a change of price. They will change their behavior. Okay. This is just illustrating the same thing, same here. Okay. So in your textbooks, I think I still have to update the page numbers on this, and I will update that before I upload this slide. Sorry about that. I forgot to update the page numbers. Please make sure that you guys know and understand this table. Okay, so it illustrates perfect inelastic, perfectly inelastic. Here where it says inelastic demand, they mean relatively inelastic, so it's between 0 and 1. Unitary is equals to 1. This is relatively elastic. I don't know why the graphs say relatively, but the table doesn't. Okay, and then you get perfectly elastic. Okay, remember that inelastic, the only product we have there that's perfectly inelastic in South Africa is medicine. They produce what they produce and it's done. They're not going to produce more regardless of the price. They will charge you any price they see fit. It is what it is. There's nothing you can do. If you need that medicine, you will pay the price. Okay, but they only produce X amount. It's got nothing to do with demand of that product, okay, or that medicine necessary. Relatively inelastic demand, there we're looking at any product that we see as a necessity. So anything we deem as a necessity tends to be inelastic, okay? Unitary one-to-one, there is actually no product that we can concurrently say for every 1 rand increase in price, there will be or 1% increase in the price, there'll be a 1% decrease in total quantity demanded. Okay, there is no product like that. Okay, relatively elastic demand, there we're saying it's any product we deem as a luxury, meaning you have a lot of options, you are very susceptible to a change in price. Then I said to you, perfectly elastic, there is no actual product like that that exists. But for the purposes of this, we have to teach you everything. Okay. This is just what the curves look like. Okay, perfectly inelastic demand, straight curve. Okay, hence I say to you, quantity demanded regardless of, that's why I say to you it's medicine, right? So regardless of the price, you're going to demand the product, regardless of the price. If you need the medicine, you are diabetic. If there's 10 people that's diabetic, you're going to need it regardless of the price. Hence, I said it's medicine. Okay. Relatively inelastic demand has a slightly steeper slope. Okay. Meaning an increase in price, very small decrease in quantity demanded. Okay. Like we're saying now with the petrol price, that was quite a steep increase. If we actually calculate the percentage increase, because they gave it to us in an absolute value. So we would have to go back and say, what was the initial petrol price and what is the new petrol price, and calculate what that percentage change is. And then we'll be able to see, okay, how responsive are consumers if the petrol price had to increase by, in this case, it was 3 rand. So let's equate that to a value. Let's pretend it's about, I don't want to, my math is not mathing at the moment, but let's say it's a 8% increase in the petrol price. How many consumers are going to change their behavior? How many of us are going to start taking the car train, start carpooling together? That's us changing our behavior because we are susceptible to a change in price. Okay. Right. So we're saying our curves, this is how we're going to draw it. So looking at it, again, it's always price and it's always, in this case, quantity demanded because we're dealing with a demand curve. Okay. So you can see if I'm drawing this curve, there's my demand curve. It's quite steep. So we'd be looking at something along the lines of a inelastic demand. So if we had a price, there's the initial price, 10 rand. Quantity demanded, 5. Okay. So we can see the producer decides to lower the price to attract sales because that's what they do. The lower the price, the higher the quantity demand, right? So there the producer decides to do that. It's now moved. So producer then decreases the price to 5 rand. That increases the quantity demanded slightly to 6. Okay. But when you calculate the percentage change, it's a 50% change, 50% change in the price. And remember, I said to you, because we are dealing with price elasticity of demand, it's the only one where you ignore the negative sign. And you ignore the negative sign because demand has a negative slope. So you should have a negative sign, but you ignore it. So we're just saying it's a 50% decrease in the price. Okay, we just ignore it. It's not a negative 50%. If we actually calculate new minus old in terms of the quantity demanded, we end up with a quantity demanded of 20%. So because the price decreased by 50%, consumers only change their behavior by 20%, meaning 20% more customers have now purchased this product. But the producer had to decrease his price by 50% in order to gain a 20% market share here. Okay. And if you calculate that, again, now we going back to the price elasticity of demand, it's quantity demanded, so it's the 20% divided by the 50%. We end up with an elasticity of negative, again, because there is a negative sign. We know this, it's demand of 0.4. So because it's less than 1, we can then ascertain that it's an inelastic. It's got an inelastic or relatively inelastic demand. Okay. So what we want to then ask you is, and this is how the questions tend to be phrased, is how are you going to give this producer advice? What are you guys going to tell him to do? Should he then decrease his price? Should he keep it the same? Should he not decrease it as much? What would you do now if knowing that this product has an inelastic demand? So we're saying, would your total revenue then fall? Would it increase? What is going to happen? And that's how the exam questions, and I think the assignment question is also structured somewhat similar. Okay. So we're saying because it has an inelastic demand. Remember, people are not as susceptible to a price change. They're not going to change their behavior if they have an inelastic demand. It's not a good move for you, okay? To decrease the price by 50%. It's not a good move, okay? Now doing the same thing and now looking at this kind of a demand curve. So it's a little bit flatter. So initially it was steep, now it's flatter, okay? Same demand curve. 10 Rand. He decides, okay, he's now going to decrease it by 7 Rand to 7 Rand. Look at the difference. Because his demand curve is elastic, it's flatter. So a 30% increase in the price has almost a 300% difference in quantity demanded. Okay, so he has more of an elastic demand. His elasticity is 10. So that means for every 1% change in the price, there's a 10% change in quantity demanded. That's how big it is. Okay. So in this case, your revenue would rise. It's to your benefit. Okay. Great move. And that's how you have to calculate it. First, calculate your elasticity, depending on, hence I'm saying it depends on the information that's being given to you. If you get an absolute value like this, you first have to calculate what is the percentage change in price, the percentage change in quantity demanded, okay? Then calculate the elasticity, so the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in the price. Again, like I said, ignore the negative sign. We're well aware that it's going to be a negative answer because it's demand. Then tell me what type of elasticity is the product. Is it inelastic or is it elastic? So if it's inelastic, it's less between 0 and 1. Your elasticity is between 0 and 1. If it's greater than 1, it's elastic. And then tell me what's going to happen in terms of revenue. Okay. This is just exactly the same concept that I've been explaining. Okay. Then, no, the government is fine. This is the same concept. There are other types of elasticity as well. Okay, so price elasticity is obviously the biggest one, but there are other types of elasticity. One of them is the income elasticity. I tell the students the easiest way to remember it is if it's price elasticity of demand, price is your independent variable. If it's income elasticity of demand, income is your independent variable. Okay, so it's quantity demanded. How responsive are we in terms of our quantity demanded of a good to changes in income? So price elasticity of demand is a measure of how responsive or the quantity demanded of a good in changes to price. Now we want to know how responsive are we to changes in our income? As our income increases, are we going to demand more of a good or less of a good? That's what we want to know. Okay. And then it goes back to, okay, is it a normal good or is it an inferior good? Okay. Inferior does not have anything to do with the quality of the product or anything like that. What it means is a normal good is as my income increases, I get more money, I get an increase, whatever the case may be in terms of my income. I will then instinctively demand more goods because I have more money. Okay, I will buy more. That's what happens. But now we're looking at the types of products that you are buying. So if, for example's sake, my income has increased, I'm now demanding more goods, great, that's a normal good. But even if my income increases, I still don't demand that. I still don't have a demand, a quantity demand for that product. It becomes an inferior good to me. Okay. I usually use the example again, Apple and Samsung, right? I'm a Samsung user. So as my income increases, the new Samsung is coming out. I'm going to then demand the Samsung. That's a normal good to me. Now, even if my income increases and I can afford the Apple product, I still won't demand it. So that to me becomes the inferior product. So even if my income doubles and I still don't demand that product, it becomes an inferior good to me. Okay, again, got nothing to do with the type of product or the specs of the product or anything like that. So please don't go into a business management tangent about it. Okay. Then we're saying, okay, so now we understand that we have normal goods and we have inferior goods. So if in the exam they talk about income, but they don't specify whether it's a normal good or an inferior good, you make the assumption it's a normal good. They physically have to tell you that it's an inferior good or give you enough information for you to understand that it's an inferior good. Okay. Otherwise, you make the assumption it's a normal good. Okay. So here you can't ignore the negative sign because now the negative sign actually tells you something. So if your income elasticity is greater than 1, it's a normal product. It's positive, it's a normal product. If it's your income elasticity is less than, okay, not less than 1, sorry, greater than 0, it's positive, it's a normal good. If it's negative, it's an inferior good. Okay. And then they break it down even more to say, great, if your income elasticity is greater than 0, but it's between 0 and 1, it's a necessity. If it's greater than 1, it's a luxury, which is the standard products. So that in terms of price elasticity of demand stays the same. Okay. So then they look, this is basically what the government looks at in terms of elasticities or your income elasticity. And they're looking at it and they're going, okay, what is important to us as consumers? You can see the things we cannot do without. So anything that has an elasticity of between 0 and 1 to us is a necessity, right? So there we have agriculture, forestry, and your fishing, food items, beverages, one to one. It depends on the beverages again. Tobacco. Isn't that interesting that tobacco is then at 0.05? So it's still between 0 and 1. Remember, it's habit forming. So people can't do without it. So they're not going to change their behavior. Okay. Clothing, your footwear, okay. Paper items is greater than 1. Printing, we're not too sure what printing was. We actually checked on that. Your plastic products, glass, you can see it's all less than 1. Things we actually use, electrical machinery, your household appliances, all of those things. Can you see what we spend a lot of our time and a lot of our money, and we're very wary of television, radio, those kind of equipments, but also television and radio. Okay. Meaning our streaming services, all of that. The moment the price goes up, you start to think, is it actually worth it? And I think because this was based in 2003, they're talking about DSTV, because back then DSTV was still a thing. How responsive were we to a change in price? Quite now, we are very responsive. DSTV can't even move at this point without a whole lot of consumers reacting to it because of all the streaming sites. Streaming sites alone. I mean, when COVID started, we just had Netflix. Now we have about 4, 5, or 6 different streaming sites that you can use. And then that also creates that whole black market type of streaming services. So you can get the machine that can connect and you can get all the streaming services for free for one. See what happens. We are very responsive to a change in price. Okay. So then to summarize, we also have a cross elasticity of demand. Here we are measuring 2 different products. How responsive are we? So is there a relationship between the 2 products? Okay. So the responsiveness of quantity demanded of a particular good to changes in the price of a related good. So it's the percentage change in quantity demanded of product A divided by the percentage change in the price of product B. Again, now, hence I'm saying only price elasticity of demand, you can ignore the negative sign. For income elasticity of demand, it tells you something. You can't ignore the negative sign. If it's a negative sign, it's an inferior good. Okay, if it's cross elasticity of demand, here, if it's negative, it's a complement. If it's positive, it's a substitute. And if it's 0, it's unrelated. Okay. I'm not going to do the example. Right, and then we get to supply. So the supply is the last element. Okay, so price elasticity of supply and price elasticity of demand calculate the same, it's the same concepts, but obviously now looking at it from a ratio of the producer to say it's the percentage change in quantity supplied of a good in relation to the percentage change in the price of that good. Okay. In understanding that supply has a positive relationship. So you have perfectly inelastic supply curve, relatively inelastic supply, okay? Same unitary 1-to-1. Then you get elastic supply or relatively elastic supply, and then you get perfectly elastic supply. Okay, so again, we're saying for every 1% change in price, what will that effect be on quantity supplied? Okay, in understanding that quantity supplied or the supply curve has a positive relationship, whereas demand has a negative relationship. So the determinants of the price elasticity of supply, the timing period consideration. So there we're looking at how long, again, can you use the product for? The price expectation, stockpiling the product, okay? your availability of resources or inputs will determine your price elasticity of supply. Okay. What can we anticipate your price would be? Are businesses stockpiling? So here, a very good example would be Takealot at the moment. Okay. Takealot has a very big problem because when they came into the market, they came in guns blazing and they wanted to give us a variety of products and it's all cheap. Now they're stuck because they have this oversupply of products at very low prices that nobody wants. Whereas I think Amazon is balancing that out quite nicely. But now Takealot has a very big problem. Okay. So now they then took over it's on Mr. D as well. They started using Mr. D drivers because even with their own drivers, they weren't making a profit anymore because their products were so cheap. Okay. So they have to now look at alternative ways because, again, the fuel prices now increase. So they have a very big problem on whether it's going to be sustainable or not. Okay. So in terms of time consideration, again, we're trying to look at long run, type of short run, how and the portion of our income that we are spending on these products. Remember, from a producer perspective, we need to know because that's very important. Okay. So just to summarize then on the tables, so these are the formulas. You guys are lucky you don't write a test, but in the exam, you get the formula sheet, luckily. But obviously, you are not going to get what it stands for, so you'll just get the formula. Okay, so price elasticity of demand, the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in the price. And remember, it's the percentage change. So if you get absolute values, you first have to calculate the percentage, and then you'll be able to calculate the elasticity in understanding that if it's between 0 and 1, you are in the inelastic category. If it's greater than 1, you are elastic. Okay. And then cross elasticity of demand. And again, here the negative sign actually means something. Price elasticity, you can ignore the negative sign. Cross elasticity, you're looking percentage change in quantity demanded of one good divided by the percentage change in the price of the other good. And then if it's positive, they're greater than 0, substitutes. Negative complements equals to 0. It's either independent or it's not related, meaning the two products have no relation to one another. Okay. Income elasticity of demand is the percentage change in quantity demanded divided by the percentage change in income. If it is greater than 0, it's a normal good. If it is less than 0, meaning it's negative, it's an inferior good. If it's between 0 and 1, it's an essential good or a necessity. And if it's greater than 1, it's a luxury product. You can, meaning a product you can do without. Then we have your price elasticity of supply. So it's percentage change in quantity supplied divided by the percentage change in the price. And the same elements apply as price elasticity of demand. If it's greater than 1, it's an elastic demand. They're very susceptible to a change in price. If it's less than 1, inelastic supply. Okay. And then unitary 1-to-1 perfectly is then infinity, and then perfectly inelastic is equals to 0. Okay. And that is this chapter done and dusted. Are there any questions? Just going to stop the recording.